Japan is the world's most advanced open-air retirement home. If you walk the streets of Tokyo or Osaka, you see a masterclass in societal maintenance. Infrastructure is pristine, the trains are never late, and the society feels safer than almost anywhere else on the planet. But if you strip away the neon lights and the polite veneer, you find a country that is mathematically cannibalizing its own future. Japan has spent well over $1 trillion in various stimulus packages, demographic initiatives, and social support programs over the last 3 decades, all under the banner of fixing its population crisis. They have built the most extensive childcare infrastructure in Asia. They have offered tax breaks for new families. They have essentially thrown the entire national treasury at the problem of a shrinking, aging workforce. And yet, it is failing. The birth rate is in a terminal nosedive, and the country is effectively trapped in a death spiral. But here is the part the politicians won't tell you. The failure isn't because they didn't spend enough money. It's because the very mechanisms they used to fix the demographic crisis are the exact reason the younger generation is too broke, too overworked, and too anxious to have children in the first place. Japan's demographic strategy is essentially a massive, state-sponsored transfer of wealth from the generation that needs to build the future to the generation that is currently consuming it. It is a suicide pact, masked as social security. Why are the world's most expensive pronatalist policies producing the lowest birth rates in history? How did a society known for its long-term planning manage to bankrupt its own demographic future to pay for the past? Is Japan's decline a unique cultural anomaly, or is it a preview of the fiscal wall every developed nation is about to hit? We are going to look at the numbers, the political capture of the elderly, and why the silver democracy is the single greatest threat to Japan's economic survival. To understand how Japan managed to spend $1 trillion and actually accelerate its decline, we have to look back at the 1980s. Japan was the world's growth engine. It was an industrial juggernaut that seemed destined to surpass the United States. But when the asset bubble burst in the early 1990s, the country entered what is now known as the lost decades. During this period, the government faced a choice. They could force painful economic restructuring, purge the zombie companies that were kept alive by cheap credit, and allow the economy to reset. Or, they could do what every government does when they are scared: they prioritized stability and preservation. They chose the latter. They shifted the entire economic focus toward protecting the status quo, which meant protecting the wealth and the pension expectations of the older generation. Think of it like a lifeboat on a sinking ship. You have 50 people on the boat, but the boat was only designed for 30. You have 2 options. You can throw the excess weight overboard, which is brutal and unpopular, or you can force the few people who are still rowing the boat to row twice as fast while you ration the food to the passengers who aren't helping. Japan chose the second option. They decided that the priority was ensuring the retired generation lived exactly the same way they did during the boom years. This created the silver democracy. In Japan, the elderly population is a massive, unified voting bloc. Politicians are terrified of upsetting them. Consequently, the government continuously funnels resources, social security, healthcare, and tax relief to the retirees. Here is the translation for how this works in real economic terms. Imagine a bakery. You have 3 employees and 3 customers. The customers are the retirees, and the employees are the young workers. The government decrees that the customers must always get their bread at a 50% discount, subsidized by the bakery. To keep the lights on, the bakery has to charge the employees double for their own lunch and take a huge cut of their wages to cover the subsidy for the customers. Eventually, the employees realize that they can no longer afford to buy their own bakery or start their own business because all their potential capital is being redirected to feed the customers. So, the employees stop working, they stop taking risks, and, predictably, they stop having children, because they cannot afford the cost of raising a family in an economy that is rigged against them. The metrics are staggering. According to the IMF and World Bank data, Japan's debt-to-GDP ratio is now over 260%, the highest in the developed world. A massive portion of this debt is essentially held by the Bank of Japan to keep interest rates artificially low so the government can afford the interest payments on the pensions and healthcare of the aging population. This leads to the twist that everyone seems to miss. Everyone talks about the population crisis as if it is a mysterious cultural phenomenon, people just deciding they don't want kids anymore. That is a lazy explanation. The truth is economic. The policies designed to stimulate birth rates, like subsidies for childcare, are a drop in the ocean compared to the massive, structural costs that are loaded onto young people through taxes and social insurance premiums. When you take the total tax and social insurance burden on a young Japanese worker, it is suffocating. They are paying for a pension system that they know will not exist when they retire. They are paying for a healthcare system that is geared entirely toward end-of-life care for the elderly. They are trapped in a system where the government is essentially saying, "We will subsidize your childcare if you produce a baby, but we are going to charge you 40% of your income to support the people who are currently driving up housing costs and hoarding all the assets." It is a feedback loop of doom. The more the government spends to support the elderly, the higher the burden on the young. The higher the burden on the young, the lower the birth rate. The lower the birth rate, the fewer young people there are to support the elderly. The government then spends more money to fix the demographic gap, which increases the burden on the few young people left. Japan is not a tragedy of culture, it is a tragedy of fiscal arithmetic. They have sacrificed their future for their past. They have essentially decided that it is better to manage a slow, polite decline for the current generation than to impose the harsh, necessary reforms that might have saved the next one. If you want to understand how this plays out in real time as the workforce continues to shrink, you should watch this video next on how the zombie company problem is actually dragging down the productivity of the entire Asian continent. I also post deep dive analysis on the macro shifts happening across the east of Wall Street every single week in my newsletter, which you can join for free at the link in the description. Thanks for watching, mate.